Hi, Rich Hoffman here. So how do you explain the two terrorist attacks by a couple of radicalized younger guys who decided that they would create mass suicide and carnage to make political or religious statements? And we're talking about the New Year's Day 2025 attacks, one where people were ruthlessly killed by a radical Islamist character with an ISIS flag on the back of his truck as he killed people for no reason at all, but to make a point. What makes someone do something like that? Then, of course, you had the guy that tried to blow up a Cybertruck in front of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas. That was the same kind of misguided nonsense, and the talk about them being connected through Fort Bragg and other affiliations is interesting. But what makes a person do something like that? What makes someone so radical that they think they have to destroy other people for their belief system, and then ultimately brings up these Islamic sleeper cells of radicalism? We saw it with certainly 9/11, and I've often talked about the third terrorist that was behind the bombing of Oklahoma City. Of course, the blame went on the people they were caught, but then there was FBI knew it. Some reporters knew it, the government knew it at the time, but there was always third terrorists out there, and they were from Iraq. And so what's the perpetual problem that we have with Islam, and how do you explain it? And I think a lot of people are reluctant to explain it because, they're worried about ticking off 2 billion people, that's about the amount of people in the world who follow the Islamic faith. And then there's about 2.5 billion people that follow Christianity. So if you break it down, political affiliations, and you look at people who support Israel and people who don't support Israel, and Palestinians against Christians and the Jewish people, when you come down to it, that's kind of your breakdown of the 50-50 split in the world, how they affiliate themselves. So of course there's Hindus, and there's Buddhists, and there's Shinto religions. There's other things out there, but your two big primaries are the Islam, Hindus, and Christians. And it kind of breaks down from there. So what's the breakaway point? Because I would say that I'm pretty fluent with the Quran. I'm very fluent with the Bible. I've studied comparative religion all my life as kind of a hobby that I get a lot of personal wealth out of. I also like psychology. I'm having a lot of fun with Jordan Peterson's work. I've received an advanced copy of his latest We Who Wrestle with God. I think I read it over Thanksgiving weekend. And I thought it was a really good piece of work to talk about the Bible and the way that he's been doing, and from a psychological, mythological vantage point. It's kind of an extension of what Joseph Campbell always did, and I think what Jordan Peterson does is wonderful. And there's some great talks, and I think that's the way you got to attack this problem, is through psychology, not necessarily religious value and assumptions about everlasting life. You have to understand what religion does for people and why they are drawn in one way or the other. So if you look at it psychologically, the very first thing that jumps out at you with these two terrorists that did this bombing on New Year's Day was that both of them appear to look to be divorced. They'd just gone through divorces over the last few years, and the emotional journey a man goes on when you lose a wife, and then the wife develops relationships with other people, and there's a lot of personal assertion that happens. That rejection is a very traumatic thing, and some men just never deal with it or get over it. And so you wonder why people are drawn to ISIS, and why there are women that were drawn to people who were in ISIS, even though it was an abusive approach to radical Islam. Why do people make the decisions they make? And you have to deal with the psychology of it, not necessarily the function of it. Just because something's bad for somebody doesn't mean they're not going to do it. There's a psychological reason. Usually people do things. Even if it's to their own detriment, they do it anyway. So why do people behave in such a detrimental way? And that's the the essence behind this. Why would someone make a decision to kill people for no reason, all in the name of some political movement or in reverence to Islamic radical Muslim faith? And why would they be drawn to such a destructive means of expressing themselves? If religion is to have an affiliation with concepts that are bigger than human existence in the ways that we typically experience it, and you want to have an everlasting approach to things, why would someone think of doing such a thing? And so that question leaves us all pondering, how do you deal with it from a terrorist perspective? How do you go about dealing with a society that has people in it that can't be free, want to take away your freedom by making you afraid through terrorism? Clearly that's what they were doing. That's what this person was doing who bombed the Cybertruck at Trump's Las Vegas tower, the hotel there. The goal was to inflict fear and carnage and make people not want to be free and have more security, take away people's the life of the West. And why is Islam so intent on destroying the West? You see radical elements all over Europe these days, and open immigration, open borders, the characters behind it, the George Soros types who have been advocating this kind of thing. You see it from Obama himself. This idea to make Islam the feature of like studying what NASA was supposed to study, not going back to the moon, but studying the Islamic traditions, contributions to science, as Obama trying to refocus NASA's program in that direction. What are you supposed to do when you have that kind of radical element out there that's trying to use a religion as a position of incursion in social unrest to overthrow what people believe and to take it over with a new belief? And then what is that belief? What constitutes the belief patterns? Obviously, that's what these two terrorists did, who coordinated some kind of attack. I'm sure we'll get more information as it comes in. But it was a coordinated attack on New Year's Day to attack Western civilization as it's formulating under President Trump and this newfound friendship he has with Elon Musk. So it culminated into this attack in Las Vegas, and it took everybody a long time to admit that's what's going on. I think anybody with half a brain could see that was what was happening as soon as it happened. It just took people too long to admit to it. And certainly the FBI tried to deny that it was Islamic terrorism for whatever reason they wanted to deny it. It was Islamic terrorism that was behind the New Orleans attacks. So why would they do it? And I'd say that the answer is an obvious one, and it comes from obviously where Islam and Christianity and the Jewish faith depart ways, and that is with the when Ishmael was the firstborn favorite son of Abraham, because he couldn't have a son because his wife Sarah was not able to have children. So he had Ishmael, and Ishmael was, he was the firstborn and it looked to be the only son of Abraham as he was came into the world, and he was born from Hagar, a servant of his wife, because she was barren. And then God gave Sarah the ability to have a child, and the child was Isaac, and Isaac became the favorite son of Abraham because that was the one he had through the institution of marriage with his wife, and wasn't an illicit son born from a slave woman. So it's not Ishmael's fault that he wasn't born from the official wife of his father, but was born of a secondary character, a woman that was not formulated through the institution of marriage. So there was a rejection once Isaac came along, and Abraham obviously favored the son from his wife, he cast off the servant mother, Hagar, because there was too much shame in it, and they were sent away, and Ishmael went with her, and they were rejected. And it's in the form of that rejection, I think, psychologically, is what you get to the heart of the problem with Islam and its war against Christianity and the Jewish faith. And that's what people are drawn to it. And if you go to those cultures and you study how they conduct themselves in society, whether they embrace socialism, Marxism, collectivism of various forms, or capitalism and family values and building relationships in strong family institutions, follow the Ten Commandments very much with the premise that the institution of marriage is very important. In Islam, you can have up to 4 wives, and that's they have some strict protocols for having multiple wives, but they don't view marriage the same way that we do in the West. And so those conflicts sort of emerge and continue on the way that the departure in the Bible or in the Quran have occurred along the lines of the 2 brothers. And so going back to the Cain and Abel story, even what you had with Ishmael was a jealous brother who had been cast off by his father because his mother was a servant woman and not the official wife in the institution of marriage, and she was sent off and to do her, live separately from the family because of the shame of it. And that shame, I'd say psychologically, is at the heart of the conflict between Islam and Christianity and the Jewish faith. And it permeates to this very day. Now, looking at it psychologically, whether it's a story that has complete merit in the truth, I think is not as relevant as the psychological impact of it served and rose as a religion to support the needs of people who do not come up in traditional families and do not have access to good, healthy relationships, and they're cast aside by the rest of the world what they think about things. And Islam is a good refuge for them. And you see in those cultures where they do have Islam as the primary way of dealing with religion. You see that socialism and Marxism comes in. The people who are affiliated with that religion don't come across very strongly. They have personal problems, and they're often attracted to these things after personal crisis, when they've been rejected by a loved one, for instance, or been rejected by a spouse. And wives don't want the husbands because of whatever reason, and they find solace and companionship in the religion of Ishmael as opposed to the spawns of Isaac. They both had the same father. They both approach things in the same essential way as far as what's big about religion in the afterworld. They're similar. However, the institution of marriage tends to be the big point of contention and the reason for the rejection of Western civilization in general. And the war against Western civilization essentially comes back to the jealousy of Cain and Abel. Abel was able to be a good person. Cain was not disposed to being a good person, and he became a disaster and sought to kill his brother. Abel was killed by Cain, and that's why the Canaanites were always looked at as vile and evil and malicious and not the kind of people that you want to affiliate with too much. And that's also why, even to this day, you have the Palestinians against the Jews, or the Palestinians against Christians, and why Christians have always been massacred by the descendants of Cain, and the descendants of Mesopotamian culture and the gods and Baal worship and all those kinds of things that have been kind of wrapped up in the background behind worship of Allah as the Quran emerged in 600 AD after a lot of evolution as Christianity came on the scene, and Arabs were looking for an identity. They had all these unique ideas formulated in their homeland, and they were looking for a way to to take it back from those hostile forces. But it all comes back down to the fights of Cain and Abel, brothers against brother, Ishmael against Isaac, and the rejection of his mother, and the way that Abraham embraced Sarah as his official wife, one wife, and the lineage that came from it. And like I said, in Islam, you can have up to 4 wives as long as you can prove that you can take care of them all, and they have their social duties and do what they do. And it's different than what we consider to be the right kind of family building in the West. And that war against that very basic value system permeates perpetually in the current crisis that we see, in the way that two religions kind of interact with each other. But why would you have Americans, people born in America, these young men, why would they be drawn to it? And I think that it comes from rejection. It comes from a feeling of not being good enough in the eyes of the father, not having an official mother. There's a lot of kids that are born out of wedlock from reckless fathers. They just go around and get a lot of women pregnant, and the kids that are born in those kinds of under those conditions are confused and upset. And I think you find that if you don't find too many people joining ISIS who have a happy dad that they can talk to every 5 minutes, or a healthy relationship with a mother. I think you find you got a lot of broken people with a lot of jealousies and anxieties in their life, and they don't know how to apply them. And that they're attracted to radical versions of religion in order to satisfy the true anger that they have. And then when you have a whole religious movement that is based on rejection, which Ishmael was rejected by his father and cast away because his mother was not married to the father. And the shame of it caused them to be rejected. You find that same attitude in this war against Christianity from radical Islam, or Islam in general, that permeates in these destructive conditions and creates so much trouble even to this day. And I think that's why you find, from a psychological point of view, why you have these American guys that tend to maybe have crisis in their life. They politically start going to the left, looking for collectivism to give them a blanket from the hostilities of the world. And radical Islamic ideas seem very strong to people who have been cast aside in life and feel like they can't live up to the reflection in the mirror. We talk a lot about the mirror these days and how people view themselves and why they have beliefs that they have and how they can be destructive and cause great harm in the world. And I think you have to admit that to yourself when you start thinking about the original battle between Ishmael and Isaac, and the difference between Islam, radical Islam especially, and Christianity and the Jewish faith, and the war that perpetuates even on New Year's Day in 2025, as the West is gaining power and momentum because Trump's getting ready to go back into office, and you have these rich capitalist characters like Elon Musk who are affiliated with it, and they're getting ready to empower the West in a way that makes the radical Islamists out there the kind of thing they've been trying to suppress forever. They've been trying to kill their own version of Abel. They've been trying to destroy the West because they don't feel they can live in it, because they don't feel authenticated to live within that structured culture. And radical Islam gives them a harbor, a safe harbor, to place their anger, because it was never Ishmael's fault that he was born to the kind of mother that it was, and it wasn't really his mother's fault that she wasn't married to Abraham. It was Sarah said, "Hey, I'm barren, I can't give you a child, have a child with my personal servant." And the decision was made, and the shame from that decision caused them to be cast away once they had an authentic son born out of the marriage. But you see a religion that has divorced itself from the narrative in the Bible and moved into Islam, and then from there it becomes no longer about Isaac, it's all about Ishmael, and then what Ishmael did, and how Ishmael founded Mecca and brought the Kaaba stone, restored it, and that was the centerpiece for everything that happened, was all centered around Ishmael, the rejected one. And I think that's why you find a lot of those types of people who don't have any other option in life, because they didn't have the advantages of a solid family or a good loving world where they were rejected for whatever reason. When a wife rejects a man, for a lot of reasons, probably for good reasons, but that rejection hurts, and it may be harder to admit to yourself that you're the cause of the rejection. It's easier to blame other elements and then migrate and hide those things from yourself by joining a radical religion and then blowing yourself up when you're really just feeling bad about a lot of other things. I don't know that that's the case with these guys, but when you already are in a bad state of mind and you're using religion to cover up the pain, don't be surprised when they show up outside a hotel room or a hotel complex for the guy that's going to be the new president and try to cause a lot of trouble with that incoming administration and bring everybody else down because you feel bad yourself. And because you've used the bad feelings and the bad decisions you made in your own life and the rejection you feel from society in general, and you're trying to replace that with these religious lofty ideas that were rooted in jealousy to begin with and always were set to be destructive to anybody that followed those rules. And that's how radical Islam. I don't think there's anything you do to make those people feel better about themselves. You have to view them with the hostility they're capable of and prepare your society for the ramification. But to think that you can have a free society based on that level of anger, you're kidding yourself. Because there's a lot of them out there. There's millions and millions of them out there. And the belief is that they're going to be, by 2060, there's going to be over 3 billion Islamist, Muslim faithful. And why is it growing as a religion? It's because there's a lot of people out there are the victims of divorce. A lot of people that have fallen off the rocker. There's a lot of Ishmaels out there who, not really by their own fault, but because society's let them down in some way or another, and they're not buying, they're not setting up themselves to support Western civilization. It's based on excellence and great talent and great ethics and good moral conduct from the perspective of social value that the West has been built around, which ultimately comes out of the Bible, out of Isaac, out of what Isaac was able to benefit from in his relationship with Father Abraham, when Ishmael, the rejected son, his firstborn, was cast out in the desert with his mother out of shame, and that shame permeates to this very day. And I think that's the best way that you can look at these things and understand why people do what they do. And there's no way to reconcile with them once they're broken. Broken people are going to do broken things, and they're going to bring great harm to other people because they have no redemption left in them in order to have a better life for themselves. So they're going to try to take it from other people. And that's why they conduct terrorist acts, because the hurt in them is so dangerous and bad, and radical Islam gives them a vehicle to express it, because that's essentially the path of Ishmael, the leader of the Islamic movement, and how and why those 2 billion people and growing, why they identify with it so strongly, and why it becomes their refuge. It started with a dispute between brothers for the love of a father, and people who know they're never going to get that love give up on trying to appease any idea of Western civilization that might come their way, and they're going to be at war with it for the rest of their existence. And there's simply no way to negotiate good tidings with people who are that broken. So what do you do about it? Well, that's the discussion we need to have. But first, you have to understand the psychological implications for why it occurs in the first place. And I think that's the way to handle it. And back on Jordan Peterson's good book, great book, We Who Wrestle with God, I recommend reading it to anybody who wants to think about these things, because religion is probably more important studied from a psychological perspective and how mythology spawns out of it and what that brings to society as a whole, because then you can admit why there's failures in that psychological approach and how they have a destructive or a beneficial effect to mass society in general. And you can then have an honest appraisal of why people believe what they do and what's the cost of those beliefs. And that's a good starting point. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.